The second I told my mother my husband had been kidnapped in a foreign country, she sighed and said, "We're in the middle of a spa day. Text us if he dies." Then she hung up. I stood in the kitchen holding the phone, my hands shaking so hard I thought I might drop it. My daughter, Marin, was coloring at the table. I didn't want her to hear me cry again, not this time. So I swallowed it. I swallowed the fear, the disbelief, the rage. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, and screamed into a towel. That was 3 days ago. This morning, my parents showed up at my front door with sympathy cards in their hands and asked if I still had access to Elias's bank accounts. My sister, Nina, stood beside them in a too-tight blazer, acting like she was here for a business meeting. My brother-in-law leaned on the railing, sipping coffee from a travel mug like it was just another Tuesday. Not one of them asked how Marin was doing. Not one of them asked if I'd slept or eaten or if I'd heard anything. I didn't say a word. Marin walked out of her room in her pajamas, holding something behind her back. She looked at each of them with more courage than I could find in myself. Then she handed my mother a folded piece of paper, crayon drawings on the outside, her tiny name in purple marker. My mom opened it slowly, carefully, like it might explode in her hands. Inside, in her uneven 7-year-old handwriting, Marin had written, "You weren't there when he was lost, so you don't get to touch what he left." My mother didn't speak. Her hands trembled. My father looked away. And I stood there and finally felt it. Clarity. After all the chaos, the silence, the waiting, that was the moment I realized I didn't lose my family 3 days ago. I lost them a long time ago. This is the story of how I found the strength to protect what mattered, when everyone else only showed up to take. My name is Leona Hale. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent most of my life trying to be the calm in other people's storms. I teach 2nd grade in a small public school in Virginia. I've packed the same lunch every weekday for the last 5 years. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, granola bar. I've memorized the favorite colors of 26 kids who aren't mine. I know which ones cry during fire drills and which ones need help tying their shoes without asking. My life isn't glamorous, but it's honest. It's warm. It's safe. My husband, Elias, isn't the kind of man who buys flowers for no reason or leaves notes in my coat pocket. He's the kind of man who flies to disaster zones when most people are flying out. He's a humanitarian doctor, part of a volunteer team that travels to underserved regions, providing emergency medical aid where it's needed most. He believes that people matter even when no one is watching. That belief is what made me fall in love with him. We met in college during a volunteer trip to Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. He was lugging bottled water and first aid kits out of a dented van. I was organizing supply tables and yelling at college boys to stop flirting and get to work. Elias didn't flirt. He smiled once, handed me a clipboard, and asked if I wanted help making things better. That's who he's always been. We married 4 years later in a quiet ceremony on the beach with sand in our shoes and no one checking their phones. Then came Marin. She was born with a serious case of curiosity and a tiny dimple on her left cheek that I swear she got from Elias. From the moment she could walk, she followed him like a shadow whenever he was home. When he packed for trips, she would sneak stickers into his luggage, so his medical supply cases looked like kindergarten art projects by the time he arrived. When he was away, she would count the days on a homemade paper chain. When he came back, she'd fly into his arms like he'd returned from the moon. Our home is modest. 3 bedrooms, a sagging porch swing, a kitchen that smells like cinnamon and floor cleaner. Elias built a birdhouse with Marin last summer, and it still hangs crooked outside her window. We live simply, but with love in the corners. Elias's job takes him away for weeks at a time, but we've built a rhythm around it. FaceTime calls during breakfast, voice messages at bedtime, lullabies sung into speakerphones. When he's home, he makes pancakes in funny shapes and reads bedtime stories like he's on stage. He's always made up for the time he missed by being fully present when he's here. I've always handled things when he's gone. Broken appliances, school pickups, last-minute fevers. I've never asked for help from my family. I've learned not to expect it. My relationship with my mother, Celia, has always been complicated. She's the kind of woman who dresses like she's going to brunch with celebrities, even if she's just picking up groceries. She believes in image over emotion, strength over softness. She's always said I'm too sensitive, too quiet, too soft-spoken for this world. My father, Ronald, rarely says much. He exists mostly in the shadow of her decisions. He nods. He agrees. He leaves the room when the air gets tense. My sister Nina is a polished version of Celia. She married Kyle, who works in finance and talks like a spreadsheet. They're both obsessed with investment opportunities, vacation properties, and credit scores. Nina once told me she was relieved I married a doctor because at least someone in the family is making a decent living. She said it while sipping wine at my baby shower. They've never understood Elias's work. They say he's reckless for leaving. They say I'm foolish for staying. I stopped trying to explain a long time ago. Marin has only seen them on holidays. They send expensive gifts that feel like apologies for not knowing her favorite ice cream flavor. So when Elias left for Nicaragua 3 weeks ago, it was just another mission. Another map on the fridge with a pushpin, another countdown chain on Marin's bedroom wall, another whispered promise from Elias at the airport, "I'll be back before you miss me." I believed him. I always do. But when the phone rang 4 nights ago and I heard the words kidnapped and ransom and unconfirmed location, everything changed. The air left the room. The calendar on the wall blurred, and the only thing I could think to do was call the people who were supposed to love me, the people who were supposed to show up. I called my mother. She answered on the 3rd ring and said, "We're at the spa. What's going on?" I told her Elias had been taken, that I didn't know where he was, that I was scared. She paused. Then she said, "Well, keep us posted. Text us if he dies." Then the line went dead. The silence after my mother hung up was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I stared at the phone in my hand, waiting for her to call back. She didn't. The kitchen light flickered overhead. Marin was still at the table, humming to herself, coloring. I had to steady my breathing so she wouldn't look up and see the panic rising in my chest. I forced a smile I didn't feel and told her I was just talking to Grandma. She nodded and went back to her drawing. I walked into the laundry room, shut the door, and finally let my knees buckle. I sat on the floor, hugging myself, trying to keep the fear from crushing me. The embassy had called 2 hours earlier. A translator explained that Elias and 2 local medical staff had been intercepted on a remote road near the northern border. He was traveling with donated supplies, painkillers, antibiotics, and clean syringes. Their van had been flagged down by armed men who claimed to be part of a regional militia. No one had heard from him since. There was no video, no proof of life, no demands, just a call from a concerned aid organization that had pieced together what they could from witnesses. The embassy told me not to panic. They said these incidents were rare. They said sometimes these groups just wanted leverage, that things resolved quickly once contact was made. They advised me not to speak to the press, not to post on social media, and not to travel. I asked them if I could speak to someone who had seen him. They said no. The first night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with Marin curled beside me, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. Every creak in the house felt like something breaking. I kept refreshing my email, hoping for updates, rereading the few lines the embassy had sent. I left the porch light on, as if somehow Elias would find his way back through the front door. My head kept spinning through the possibilities. Was he hurt? Was he cold? Was he even alive? The next day, I called everyone. I left messages with his coworkers, his supervisor, the organization's main office. Everyone was either too busy or didn't know more than I did. I called the embassy again. They repeated the same reassurances. Then I called my mother a second time. She didn't answer. I tried my sister. Nina picked up after 2 rings, her voice bright and sharp. "Hey, what's up?" she asked. I told her what had happened. Her tone shifted. "Oh, wow," she said. "That's intense. Can you come? I just need someone here. I can't think straight." There was a pause. "Kyle's got a thing tomorrow and I've got a pitch due. Maybe Friday? Unless you need, like, right now?" I said never mind and hung up. That night, I took Marin to bed early and sat in the living room by myself. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dark, listening to the tick of the clock and the faint sound of traffic from the street. I realized how deeply alone I was, not just in that moment, but in the ways that mattered. My family wasn't unreachable. They were uninterested. On the third day, I woke up to the sound of knocking. I hadn't brushed my hair, I hadn't showered, I was wearing the same sweater I'd slept in. I opened the door and froze. Celia stood on the porch holding a bouquet of white lilies. Ronald was behind her, silent. Nina and Kyle stood next to them with paper bags and a stack of sympathy cards. I didn't say anything. I just opened the door wider and stepped aside. Celia looked around the living room like it offended her. She set the flowers on the coffee table and sat down like a guest at a hotel. Nina spoke first. "We weren't sure if you'd want company, but, it felt like the right thing." Kyle cleared his throat. "Have you contacted the bank? Just thinking ahead. If there's accounts or assets in his name only, that stuff can get complicated." I stared at them, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. Celia sipped from a bottle of imported water and said, "We just want to be helpful. There might be insurance forms, payouts. These things get messy." Marin walked out of her room in pajamas, clutching her stuffed owl. She paused when she saw the living room full of people. Celia smiled at her. "Hi, sweetie. Grandma's here." Marin didn't answer. She walked to her art desk, sat down, and began to draw. I stood there, unable to move. I had spent 3 days holding myself together with coffee and panic, hoping someone would come through the door and offer help. And when someone finally did, it was only to see what could be claimed. They hadn't come for Elias. They hadn't come for me. They had come for the pieces they could gather just in case he never came home. I stood frozen in my own living room while my mother talked about death paperwork and Nina mentioned power of attorney like it was a normal Tuesday errand. Kyle pulled out his phone and started tapping through some kind of banking app, like we were all just waiting for the next transaction. Marin sat at her desk, quiet and focused. She wasn't drawing for fun this time. She had her tongue between her lips in that concentrated way she got when she was working through something hard. I didn't interrupt her. I couldn't. My legs felt like concrete, like moving would snap something inside me I wasn't ready to face. My mother crossed her legs and spoke without looking at me. "If Elias didn't leave you legal access to his accounts, we'll have to talk to a probate attorney. You're going to need help navigating that. You're not really equipped to handle this alone." She said it like she was offering advice about a clogged sink, not my missing husband. My father stood in the corner of the room picking at a cuticle, pretending to study the family photos on the wall. He stopped on one of Maureen and Elias by the birdhouse, his face unreadable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them to get out, to take their sympathy cards and their awful timing and their greedy hands and never come back, but the words stuck somewhere in my throat. All I could do was sit down slowly on the arm of the couch, trying not to cry in front of Marin again. That's when she stood up. She didn't say anything. She walked to me, hugged me once, tight and certain, then turned and walked over to my mother. Her bare feet made soft thuds on the hardwood floor. She held something behind her back. Celia looked up, startled. Marin extended her hand and gave her a folded sheet of white paper, the kind we keep stacked by her coloring books. It had blue and green crayon marks on the outside. My mother raised her eyebrows and opened it. There were just a few lines written in purple crayon, large and uneven, each word spaced carefully like she had practiced it a few times before getting it right. "You weren't there when he was lost, so you don't get to touch what he left." My mother's hand began to tremble. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She stared at the note for a long time. My father finally looked away from the photo and sat down beside her. Nina blinked and took a step back. Kyle chuckled under his breath, uncomfortable. Marin walked back to her room and shut the door. I let the silence hang in the air. I watched my mother shift in her seat, watched Nina's carefully rehearsed calm start to slip. I looked at Kyle still holding his phone and realized in that moment that I didn't owe them anything. Not explanations, not comfort, not even anger. Their presence had nothing to do with love or concern. They came for what Elias might have left behind. But the most valuable thing he gave me was still here, standing in that hallway, reminding me what love actually looks like. That night, after they left, I made a decision. I didn't cry again. I didn't wait for another call from someone who wouldn't answer. I sat down at the dining table and started going through everything Elias and I had ever talked about in case something like this happened. I found the emergency binder we kept in the closet, the passwords, the legal forms, the will. He had listed me as sole beneficiary. He had signed everything. He had planned for this, somehow, and in doing that, he had left a trail of breadcrumbs back to control, back to certainty. I followed everyone. I called the bank and confirmed I had full access. I contacted our attorney and gave him updates. I changed passwords, secured documents, backed up files. I did it all without calling my family. They didn't need to know. Later, I tucked Marin into bed. She curled against me and whispered, "I didn't want them to take Daddy's stuff." "They won't," I said. "You protected him better than anyone." She nodded and closed her eyes. I sat beside her until she fell asleep. Then I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. That was when I knew. Whatever came next, I wasn't the same woman I was 3 days ago. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was acting. They came for control. But I chose clarity, and I chose to protect the only future that mattered. Ours. The next morning began the same as the last 3. Quiet, tense, uncertain. Marin wanted pancakes, but I didn't have the energy to cook them the right way. I handed her cereal and kissed the top of her head. She didn't complain. She sat on the living room floor with her owl tucked under one arm and started arranging her crayons by color. I checked my phone again. Nothing. I hadn't received an update since the night before. The embassy said they were still working with local officials, still optimistic, still monitoring developments. Every vague word burned a little deeper. I didn't want optimism. I wanted Elias. I started the dishes, scrubbing a single plate over and over until my phone buzzed on the counter. I grabbed it so fast I nearly knocked it to the floor. A message flashed across the screen. Unknown number, foreign area code, 1 line, safe. I'm okay. I'm coming home. I couldn't breathe. My knees buckled. I slid down the cabinet door, phone clutched to my chest like a lifeline. Marin looked over from her crayons, confused, but I couldn't speak. Tears poured down my face. I just nodded over and over until I could force the words out. "He's safe," I said. "Daddy's safe." Marin ran to me, arms tight around my neck. I pulled her into my lap and held her so close I thought we might fuse together. I didn't know the details. I didn't know how, or who, or what it cost. But he was alive. That was all that mattered. The embassy called 30 minutes later. They confirmed he had been recovered during a coordinated operation with local police. He was dehydrated, bruised, shaken, but alive. He was being brought to a hospital in the capital city for evaluation. He would be flown home as soon as doctors cleared him for travel. They said it might take a few days. I hung up and sobbed again, this time from relief. Later that afternoon, Celia called. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was softer than usual, but it still carried that edge she never seemed to lose. "I heard," she said. I didn't ask how. "That's good," she added, like she had to force the word out. "Really good." "Yeah," I said, "it is." There was a long pause. "Have you spoken to the attorney again?" she asked. I felt my chest tighten. "Yes." "I was thinking, maybe once he's home we should talk. About how to help, financially, I mean. You probably have a lot to sort through." "No," I said. "We won't be needing anything." "I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it exactly like that." She didn't respond. I ended the call and blocked her number. Nina texted me a few hours later, just a heart emoji and a praying hands. I deleted it without replying. Elias came home 4 days later. He walked through the airport terminal slowly, thinner than before, with a bandage around one hand and dark bruises under his eyes. But his smile was still his. Marin ran to him with her owl in one arm and her backpack bouncing off her shoulders. He dropped his bag and knelt to catch her, holding her so tightly I saw his arms tremble. When I reached him, he stood up and pulled me in. I buried my face in his chest and breathed him in. He smelled like antiseptic and sweat and home. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "I'm sorry." "Don't be," I said. "You came back." That night, we didn't talk about what happened. Not yet. He needed time and I needed silence. We lay in bed holding hands while Marin slept between us, one tiny hand resting on his chest as if to anchor him there. The next day, I told him everything about the phone calls, the visit, the cards, the questions about money, Marin's note. His jaw clenched. His eyes didn't blink for a long time. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "I know." He kissed Marin's forehead and said, "You protected us." "She did," I said. "She saw through all of it before I could." We didn't discuss next steps. We didn't plan how to explain anything to the rest of the family. We just decided, without saying it out loud, that the three of us were enough. The people who showed up only when they thought you were gone never deserved to be there when you came back. Elias has been home for 2 months now. His bruises have faded. He's regained the weight he lost. The nightmares come less often. Some nights he wakes up gasping, drenched in sweat, reaching for me like he's still afraid someone might take him. I hold him and remind him he's here. I remind him that we're here. Marin sleeps better too. The paper chain she made to count the days until his return still hangs in her room, half finished. We never took it down. She said she wanted to leave it up so she could remember how hard we fought for each other. We go on walks in the evening, the three of us, just around the block. Elias holds Marin's hand on one side, mine on the other. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we don't. But there's comfort in the quiet now, not dread. It's a different kind of peace, the kind that grows after the storm passes. We haven't heard from my family. After Elias returned, I sent a message to each of them. It wasn't angry. I didn't accuse or explain. I simply said this: "We are safe. We are whole. We no longer need anything from you." Celia never replied. Nina sent back a thumbs-up emoji. My father said nothing, which in his world is a sentence. I thought I would feel grief. I thought closing the door for good would break me, but it didn't. It was like removing a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I grew up believing family was something you had to keep close, no matter how it hurt. I understand now that love isn't an obligation. It's a choice. And some people will never choose you unless there's something they can take. Elias and I had long talks in the days after his return. He told me about the small, dark room they kept him in, about the men who guarded the door and the moments when he thought he might never come back. He said what kept him sane was Marin's voice in his head, singing songs they made up during bath time. He said what kept him from giving up was imagining me on the other side of that door, waiting. He didn't know what I was facing here. He didn't know that while he was held in the dark, people who claimed to love us were circling like vultures. He didn't know about Marin's note, or the cold hands holding sympathy cards, or the questions about money before his pulse had even been confirmed. But when I told him, he didn't flinch. "They revealed themselves," he said. "Now we know." That knowledge has changed how I move through the world. I no longer explain myself. I no longer soften the truth to make others comfortable. I have boundaries now, real ones. Not just the kind I whispered to myself late at night, but the kind that stand like steel around the people I love. I started journaling again. Not because I'm trying to be poetic, but because writing helps me track who I'm becoming. I write about what strength looks like when you have to fake it. I write about parenting through grief, about holding a flashlight in the dark long enough for someone you love to find their way home. Marin has started drawing again. Real drawings. Her lines are stronger now, more certain. She recently gave Elias a picture of the three of us standing in front of our house, with the words, "We win," in bright red marker above our heads. He keeps it on his nightstand. There are still hard days. We're not untouched by what happened. Trauma doesn't vanish. But we've woven it into something honest, something that doesn't own us. The world kept spinning during the days we thought everything had stopped. Bills still came, school lunches still needed to be packed, but we learned that even while the world doesn't pause, we can choose to slow down. We can choose each other. I used to think resilience meant standing tall through everything. Now I know it's about knowing when to kneel beside your child and cry with them, when to whisper, "I'm scared too," and when to rise again, because love demands it. This is what family means to me now. It's not who shares your last name. It's who shows up when the sky falls, who stays, who protects, who believes your pain without asking you to prove it. We were never alone. We had each other, and that was always enough. If this story meant something to you, if it made you feel something, or reminded you of the strength we all carry when everything falls apart, I hope you'll take a moment to share it. There are so many people out there going through quiet storms, feeling alone when they're anything but. Sometimes a story is all it takes to remind someone that survival is not weakness. It's proof of love. So if you felt this, please like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and drop a comment below. Tell me what you're holding on to. Tell me who showed up when it mattered. I read every word, and your stories matter too. And if you want more true, human stories like this, about pain, survival, family, and what we find in the ashes, subscribe to the channel. There's more coming, and I want you here for it. Thank you for listening, and thank you truly for being here. When I called my mom to tell her I had cancer, she said, "We're in the middle of your cousin's bridal shower. Can this wait?" I could hear champagne glasses clinking behind her as I sat in my parked car outside the oncology clinic, gripping a piece of paper that spelled out stage 2 breast cancer. 2 days later, my sister Ivy called. "Can you co-sign for my car loan? I can't get approved without you." Not a single visit, not one offer to help with my 6-year-old son. But suddenly I was useful again, because they needed my name on something. Then came the day they all showed up smiling, pretending everything was fine. That's when my son, Luca, quietly handed my mom a folded doctor's note. "Mommy said to show you this if anyone asked for money," he said. The second they read it, their smiles disappeared. My name is Zara Miles. I'm 32, a full-time nurse, and the mother of a 6-year-old boy named Luca. I live in Cleveland in a 2-bedroom apartment that smells faintly of lavender and Lysol, depending on the day. It's not fancy, but it's ours, and in that space I've built a life around consistency, love, and routine. Each morning starts the same. I'm up by 5:30 packing a lunch that Luca probably won't finish and setting out a clean outfit while I iron my scrubs. By 6:30, I've done his hair, answered at least 3 questions about the solar system, and reminded him twice to brush his teeth. Then I drop him at school, head to the hospital, and begin 12 hours of managing chaos with a calm face. Being a nurse teaches you how to prioritize, how to triage not just patients, but emotions. You learn to tuck your pain away for later, to smile when you're tired, to comfort strangers while your own life waits quietly at the bottom of the list. That's how I lived. Efficient, dependable, emotionally organized. I didn't complain, not when the bills piled up. Not when Luca's father disappeared from our lives before his 2nd birthday. Not even when I had to choose between getting my car serviced or renewing his asthma prescription. I made it work. I always made it work. If you asked my family, they'd call me the strong one, the one with her life together. But the truth was, I wasn't strong because I wanted to be. I was strong because there was no other option. My mother, Caroline, is the type of woman who keeps family photos in perfect alignment on her mantle, but can't remember the last time she hugged me. She cares deeply about appearances. Her love is tidy and conditional. She was a stay-at-home mother who believed in discipline, image, and silence when things got uncomfortable. My father, Reed, lives in her shadow. He's kind, quiet, the type of man who offers to fix your sink instead of asking how your heart is doing. Growing up, he was there in the physical sense, but emotionally, he deferred everything to my mother. And then there's Ivy, my younger sister. Ivy is beautiful, impulsive, and magnetic. She's the kind of person who knows how to charm a room, then quietly ask for money in the hallway. She dropped out of community college, tried 3 different careers in 4 years, and still somehow landed in a new apartment every time she ran out of money. Guess who helped her get those leases? Me. I've bailed Ivy out of everything from unpaid parking tickets to utility shutoffs. My parents called it helping your sister, but I started to realize it was always a one-way transaction. When I needed support during nursing school with a newborn, no one offered to babysit. When I worked double shifts and fell asleep sitting up, they told me I needed to manage my time better. Still, I kept showing up, birthdays, holidays, emergencies. I was the dependable daughter, the reliable sister, the one who remembered everyone's appointments, bought last-minute gifts, and drove 3 hours in the snow to attend a baby shower that no one even thanked me for. Luca became my reason for everything. He gave me joy in a way no one else could. He didn't expect perfection. He just wanted me to be present. His love was simple and full, and he never had to earn mine. The day I found the lump in my left breast, I was in the shower getting ready for work. It felt small, firm, foreign. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a cyst, maybe stress, but I knew better. I scheduled an exam on my lunch break and told no one. Not because I was afraid of the diagnosis, I was afraid of the silence that might follow it. When the call came, confirming it was cancer, I didn't cry. I took a deep breath, looked over at Luca coloring at the kitchen table, and told myself I'd figure it out. I sat in my car for 15 minutes before dialing my mom. I wanted to hear her voice, to feel like someone had my back. But when she picked up, her tone was rushed. "We're in the middle of Melina's bridal shower," she said. "Can this wait?" I didn't tell her. I just said, "Sure," and hung up. I knew right then. I wasn't calling back. Not that night. Maybe not ever. After I hung up on my mom, I sat in my car with the seatbelt still buckled and stared out at the street. I watched people walk past with grocery bags and coffee cups, going on with their normal lives, while mine had just shifted into something unrecognizable. It wasn't just the word cancer that haunted me. It was the realization that I had no one to say it to, no one to sit beside me, no one who saw the storm coming. The next day, I went to work. I kept my routine. I made breakfast for Luca. I packed his lunch. I hugged him twice before he walked into his classroom. At the hospital, I checked vitals, reassured patients, took notes, and smiled when the shift supervisor passed by. Not because I was okay, but because I didn't know how to do anything else. That night, after Luca fell asleep, I opened my laptop and started researching treatment plans. The screen glowed with words like invasive, chemotherapy, radiation, and survival rates. I didn't cry. I made a list. Doctors to call, days I could take off, who I might ask for help. But that last column stayed empty. I tried calling my dad. He answered, but I could hear the TV in the background and the familiar, quiet hesitation in his voice. "Hey, Dad, I'm dealing with something. Can we talk?" There was a pause. "Now's not the best time, sweetie. The Browns game just started. Can I call you back after?" I told him it was fine and hung up. Over the next few days, I had my first oncology consult, a CT scan, and blood work, alone. Every form I filled out asked for an emergency contact. I put down the name of a coworker, Renee, who I barely knew but had once brought me soup when I had the flu. That's how low the bar had gotten. I started chemo the following week. The nurse inserted the IV and smiled gently. "Do you have someone waiting for you in the lobby?" I shook my head. She gave me a longer look, then turned away to adjust the machine. My body changed faster than I expected. I was nauseous, dizzy, and exhausted in ways I couldn't explain. I lost my appetite. My hair started falling out in chunks, so I shaved it before Luca could see the worst of it. When he asked why, I told him it was part of the medicine, and he nodded with a serious little face like he understood more than I wanted him to. That weekend, my phone rang. Ivy. I hadn't heard from her since Easter. "Hey, so this is random, but I'm trying to get a car and my credit is trash. I need a co-signer just for the paperwork." I sat on the couch with an ice pack on my neck, trying not to throw up. "Did Mom tell you what's going on?" There was a pause. "No? What?" "I have cancer. I started chemo last week." Ivy exhaled like I had just told her I lost my keys. "Oh wow, that sucks, but you're not dying, right? You'll be okay?" "I don't know yet." "Okay, but can you still co-sign or is this a bad time?" The words were real. I heard them. I just couldn't believe they came out of her mouth. I didn't answer. I hung up. The next morning, I found Luca sitting at the table, holding a crayon and writing something on a piece of folded paper. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "I'm making something to help you." I didn't look at it then. I just kissed the top of his head and packed his backpack. That week, my family started calling more, not to ask how I was doing, but to plan Melina's wedding shower, to ask if I could bake something for the dessert table. And yes, Ivy brought up the car loan again. They started showing up at my door, unannounced, all smiles, like nothing had happened. I realized then that my sickness hadn't pulled them toward me. It had only made me more inconvenient. And the second they saw an opportunity, they tried to turn me back into the role I had always played, the one who fixes things. But something had changed. This time, I wasn't going to play along. After that call with Ivy, something inside me broke. But not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't disappointment. It was a kind of sharp clarity, like waking up from a long sleep and realizing the house is on fire. I had spent years being the family's emergency plan, the helper, the fixer, the one who filled in the silence, made excuses, carried burdens that were never mine. But cancer doesn't give you room to carry other people's messes. You either protect your energy or you lose it. That week, I sat down at the kitchen table and made a different kind of list. Not for groceries, not for doctor's appointments. This one was for boundaries, real ones. I wrote down every person in my life and what I would and would not tolerate going forward. I underlined Ivy's name. Then I drew a red line next to the words, no co-signing. That wasn't just about the car. That was about everything. Luca sat across from me, eating grapes and watching me write. He asked, "Are you doing homework, Mommy?" I smiled. "Kind of. I'm learning how to take care of myself." Later that night, I went into his room to tuck him in. He looked up at me, his voice soft. "Is your sickness gonna make you die?" I froze. I had practiced how I might answer that question in my head, but nothing prepares you for it in real life. I knelt beside his bed and said, "I'm gonna do everything I can to get better. That's why I'm taking all the medicine, even though it makes me feel sick." He nodded and pulled his blanket up to his chin. "Okay, I just want you to stay." I kissed his forehead. "I'm not going anywhere, baby." That conversation changed everything. Not because I was afraid of dying. I had already faced that fear in the clinic. What scared me more was the idea of leaving my son in a world where people like my family were the loudest voices in the room. I had to show him what it looked like to draw a line and stand on the right side of it. I called my therapist the next day and asked to move up my next session. We talked about guilt, about how women, especially mothers, especially daughters, are taught that love looks like endurance, that we're supposed to keep giving, even when it empties us. She said, "You're allowed to change the rules when the old ones were written without your consent." That stuck with me. The next time Ivy called, I didn't pick up. When Mom texted to remind me about Melina's bridal shower, I didn't respond. I wasn't angry, I was exhausted, and I had nothing left to give to people who couldn't show up for me in the smallest ways. Instead, I turned inward. I started attending a cancer support group at the hospital on Thursdays. I let my neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Watts, take Luca to school on my hard chemo days. I accepted meals from coworkers who offered, instead of brushing it off with, "I'm fine." Letting people help me felt like learning a new language. But it felt honest. Then came the day the family showed up at my door. It was Saturday. I was wearing an oversized hoodie and hadn't slept well. The doorbell rang and there they were, Mom, Dad, Ivy, smiling like they were delivering good news. "We thought we'd come by and check on you," Mom said, holding a store-bought fruit tray. Ivy walked in like she owned the place. "Also, I talked to the dealership again. They said the cosigner just needs to have stable income, so we should be good if you're still working." She said it like we were discussing weekend plans. Like I hadn't been sick. Like my hair wasn't gone. Like my son hadn't seen me throw up every morning for a month. I didn't say a word. Instead, I turned to Luca and said, "Sweetheart, can you bring me the paper Mommy gave you last week?" He ran to his backpack and came back with a folded envelope. He handed it to my mother. "She said to give this to you if anyone asked for money." The room went quiet as my mother opened the note. I watched their eyes scan the words. Their smiles vanished. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence. My mother's fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the paper Luca had handed her. Ivy leaned over to look. My dad stood behind them, quiet as usual. But even he stopped pretending this was a casual visit. The room, just moments ago filled with small talk and awkward smiles, had gone completely still. The note was short, printed neatly on a half sheet of paper from my oncologist's office. It read, "Zara Miles is currently undergoing active chemotherapy treatment. Due to physical and emotional fatigue, she will not be engaging in financial agreements, including co-signing, lending, or contributing to non-essential family expenses. Please respect her recovery and do not place additional stress on her." It was signed by my doctor and included her official stamp. I watched their faces. My mother's jaw tightened as she refolded the paper with careful, deliberate motions. She didn't say thank you. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She just turned to me and said, "You didn't need to involve Luca in this. It's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" That was the moment I stopped hoping she would ever change. I met her eyes and said, I involved Luca because he's the only one in this family who's actually watched me fight for my life. He's earned the right to speak the truth when none of you will. My dad shifted his weight, looked down at the floor, and said nothing. Ivy scoffed. It's not that serious. I just needed help getting a car. You act like we're asking for your kidney. I stepped forward and looked her straight in the face. I'm fighting cancer alone. I've gone to every treatment without anyone from this family sitting beside me. I've thrown up in hospital bathrooms and still managed to get home in time to pick up my son. I've paid every bill while losing my hair, my strength, and parts of myself you'll never understand. And the first time any of you show up, it's not to help. It's to ask for something. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't let her. I gave everything for this family. I co-signed Ivy's first lease. I paid the deposit when you broke your phone. I left work to pick up Uncle Neil from dialysis. I never asked for anything back, but when I needed you, you disappeared. My mother stepped in, her voice colder now. We didn't disappear. We just assumed you'd tell us if it got that bad. It did get that bad, and I did tell you. You just chose not to hear me. I turned to Luca, who was standing in the hallway listening. I called him over and placed my hand on his back. This is who I'm protecting now. Not your feelings, not your image. Him. He looked up at me, confused but calm. He didn't know every detail, but he understood enough. He had felt the tension in my bones. He had watched me lose weight and sleep and energy, and he had never once asked for anything except the truth. I looked back at my family. You don't get to ask for pieces of me when you refuse to be here for the whole. I'm not the backup plan anymore. I'm not the fixer. I'm not the one you lean on when it's convenient. The silence sat heavy between us. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, my mom set the fruit tray down on the counter like it mattered. Well, I guess we'll leave then. She turned and walked out. My dad followed her. Ivy didn't say goodbye. She looked back once like she might say something, but then rolled her eyes and left. When the door closed behind them, I locked it. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. I had spent my entire adult life trying to be someone they would treat with love, but love shouldn't be earned like a paycheck. Love should show up when you're too weak to ask for it. I knelt down next to Luca and hugged him tight. You did great, sweetheart. Thank you for giving them the note. He smiled. Did it work? I nodded. Yes, it really did. That night, we ate grilled cheese and watched his favorite space documentary on the couch. I let him stay up past bedtime. And when he fell asleep with his head on my lap, I didn't feel sad. I felt free. The week after they walked out of my apartment, I didn't hear from anyone in my family. No follow-up calls, no texts, no surprise visits. And for the first time, their silence felt like peace. There was no pretending anymore. No need to brace myself for the next favor wrapped in false concern. I was no longer orbiting a family that only acknowledged me when I was useful. I was standing still, in my own space, surrounded by the people who truly saw me. Luca and I settled into a new rhythm. On chemo days, I rested while he sat beside me with his coloring books. He liked to narrate what he was drawing. A spaceship, a cheetah, sometimes a superhero who looked suspiciously like me. This one fights with light, he told me once. She can melt bad things just by touching them. There was healing in that, not just from the illness, but from the years of invisible wounds I had ignored. I started letting people in, not the ones who shared my last name, but the ones who had shown up without needing to be asked. My co-worker, Renee, began bringing Luca little snacks when she knew I had long treatment days. Mrs. Watts, my neighbor, started sitting with me during infusions, knitting quietly, reminding me I didn't have to be strong all the time. I used to think family was defined by history, that sharing a bloodline meant you shared a bond. But cancer taught me something different. Family is not who you're related to. It's who stands with you when the ground falls out. It's who holds your hand when there's nothing left to give. It's who sees you at your lowest and doesn't flinch. My mother still sends photos of family events. Ivy posts smiling group shots on social media. I don't react, I don't engage, not because I'm bitter, but because I'm done asking for space in a story I was never truly part of. There are still hard days. My body doesn't bounce back like it used to. Some mornings I wake up and it takes everything in me to stand up, brush my teeth, and pretend I feel normal. But even in the struggle, there's a sense of strength I didn't have before. Not the kind that's built on endurance, but the kind that grows from clarity. I know what I will and will not allow. I know who I can count on. And I know that surviving means more than just staying alive. It means choosing yourself even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you relationships you once thought were permanent. Luca has become my mirror. He watches everything: how I speak, how I set boundaries, how I protect my peace. He once asked me why I don't see Grandma or Aunt Ivy anymore, and I told him the truth in a way he could hold. Sometimes people love you in a way that hurts, and when that happens, it's okay to step away so you can heal. He nodded, then asked if we could go to the park. That's what children do. They absorb the truth and keep moving. One afternoon, after a follow-up appointment where I learned my scans were clear, I took Luca out for ice cream. We sat on a bench under the late summer sun, watching people pass by. He leaned against me, sticky and smiling, and said, "I like you better now." I laughed. "What do you mean?" "You don't look tired anymore." I felt tears rise but didn't let them fall. He was right. I didn't feel tired. Not in the way I used to. I felt light, felt awake. This wasn't just the end of a cancer battle. It was the beginning of something else, a life where I am no longer small in my own story, where my worth isn't measured by what I give to others, but how I protect what I've built for myself and my son. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the reliable one, the one who's always strong, always available, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to draw a line. You are allowed to choose peace. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your DNA. Healing is not just about getting better. Sometimes it's about walking away, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop answering the door. If this story reached you, if it reminded you of something you've lived through or something you're still trying to heal from, I want you to know you're not alone. Strength doesn't mean silence, and walking away from what breaks you is not weakness, it's courage. If you found value in this story, please like the video so it reaches others who might need to hear it. Share it with someone you love, or someone who needs a reminder that it's okay to choose peace over obligation. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've experienced something similar or just want to share your own turning point, drop a comment below. I read everyone. And if stories like this speak to you, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. This space is for all of us who've been through the quiet battles. You're welcome here. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourself. You matter.